A backhand shelf beauty on Andrei Vasilevskiy at the Stadium Series game on Sunday may have been the perfect showcase for a trade that both Matt Poitras and the Boston Bruins are seeking.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. Today is Tuesday, February 3rd. I'm your host, Ian McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for nearly 20 years. On today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, we are going to discuss the rumors, reports out there about both Matt Poitras and the Boston Bruins not being necessarily happy with how things stand between the two parties and how that could lead to a trade, especially with the emergence of Fraser Minten. We will also update the Eastern Conference power rankings with only one game for the Bruins and a few days remaining before the NHL takes a break for the Olympics, which I'm very excited to watch coming up next week. We will remain daily through the Olympics and update all the Bruins who are going to be participating, as well as what's going on with the team away from the tournament. All right, so let's get into it. Here last week on the Fan 590 up here in Toronto, which is a local sports talk radio station, Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet appeared on that show and discussed a potential rift that has developed between Matt Poitras and the Boston Bruins. And Friedman cited the fact that Matt Poitras recently changed agents and how that is rarely a good sign for a player who's perhaps looking for a change of scenery. Now, why would either side not be super happy with the other? Well, from Matt Poitras' perspective, he was a guy who made the Bruins back in 2023-24, impressed in training camp in his first pro season, and earned himself a spot on what was, at the time, a pretty loaded team. His season was cut short due to a shoulder injury. He went to the World Juniors, and he was never really able to recapture his status as that kind of breakout rookie sensation. He appeared in 33 games in 2024-25 with fewer goals and fewer points than he achieved in the same amount of games the season before. Was sent down to Providence, where he had 41 points in 40 games in 2024-25. But once again, this year was not able to make the team out of training camp, and his production at the AHL level so far this season was well behind what he achieved last year. He had 40 games in 2024-25, 17 goals, 24 assists for 41 total points. He had 39 games in Providence this season so far, 8 goals, so less than half what he achieved last year, 16 assists for only 24 points. So, from a Bruins perspective, we see a guy who worked his butt off to achieve a spot a few years ago, back when Patrice Bergeron, David Krejci were still around. He always rose to the task and earned that spot. It wasn't just a token, let's get a young guy in there, because the Bruins are reluctant to do that anyways. It was, this guy is ready, he's earned it, even at 18, 19 years old. You have a shoulder injury, you have other guys who come in and take some spots, which made it harder for him to recapture his spot on the roster. And then you also have kind of diminishing returns, offensively at least, at the AHL level, which meant some other guys were called up before he was, namely Alex Steves, Matej Blumel got a call up earlier this season. Georgi Merkulov got a little bit of a taste earlier this season as well, as now the leading scorer in Providence Bruins history. Now, Poitras was recalled due to an injury to Elias Lindholm last week. He's played a couple games for the Bruins so far and has looked pretty good. He had a couple scoring chances in his first game last week. He scored a backhand beauty, top shelf glove side on Andrei Vasilevskiy in the Stadium Series game, which at that point made the score 5-1. And as Elliot Friedman reported, both sides aren't necessarily happy with how things have progressed. Poitras, on his side, surely believes that he should have been back in the NHL before, and that he has not been granted an opportunity like he thought he was going to get after making the team a few years ago. For the Bruins side of things, you have, injuries, what have you, that have stalled his development, but even in pretty much the same amount of games played in the AHL over the past 2 seasons, you've had fewer goals, fewer points, and not quite the upward trajectory you would like to see from a 21-year-old who believes he should be in the NHL while also not producing as well as he did in the AHL compared to a season ago. All that led to Matt Poitras changing agents. His name came up in the recent Rasmus Andersson trade speculation involving the Calgary Flames. The package was believed to be Poitras, Mason Lohrei, maybe a first-round pick going to Calgary in exchange for Rasmus Andersson, a right-hand shot defenseman that the Bruins desperately need. And the reality is, too, that Poitras, it's hard to see where he fits into the team long-term. You have Elias Lindholm signed for the next handful of seasons. You have Marat Khusnutdinov, who's emerged as a legit NHLer. He played the first line the other night in Lindholm's absence. You have, of course, the emergence of Fraser Minten, who is the NHL's Rookie of the Month for January, who played on the second line the other night in the absence of Pavel Zacha. Poitras, therefore, was up because those two guys were already hurt, so there was a need in the lineup. And then, of course, you have James Higgins come in as soon as maybe the end of this college season. So where does Poitras fit in long term? If you have, Lindholm, maybe you re-sign Zacha, you've got Fraser Minten, Khusnutdinov, James Higgins coming. Suddenly they have a bit of a logjam down the middle, and if Poitras is not willing or not able to play, say, right wing on this team, then maybe it's a situation where he is used as a trade chip to land a bigger fish. We know that, again, the Bruins have a big need on the right-hand side. Defense, behind Charlie McAvoy, they would love a guy who can quarterback a power play, chip in offensively, solid defensively. They also could use a guy who can be a long-term solution on the second line instead of Victor Arvidsson, who's played very well for the team this season, but probably not the long-term solution at that pretty key position. Casey Middlestat, Pavel Zacha have been playing very well on that second line with Victor Arvidsson. You would think that maybe a guy like Fabian Lysell or Matt Poitras could step into that role if Arvidsson is moved out at the trade deadline, which is probably the wise thing to do, instead of looking to re-sign him at age 32 when he's had some injury issues, been in and out of the lineup. It's a question of where Poitras fits in the grand scheme of things for the Bruins. And from Poitras' point of view, being NHL ready, having had a taste a couple seasons ago, not being one of the first 1, 2, or 3 guys to be called up, and wondering, what's my place within this organization? And maybe I should look elsewhere for a better opportunity. Maybe this isn't the spot for me long term. And that's why he changes agents, maybe looking to shake things up, send a message to the Bruins that, hey, I'm not super happy with my lack of, promotion within the organization, and maybe I'd like a fresh start somewhere else. From the Bruins' point of view, it's like, well, yeah, you wowed us a couple years ago, haven't quite shown that growth and that determination, that grabbing a spot and making it impossible for us to deny you a spot on the lineup. 17 points fewer in almost the same amount of games at the AHL level this season compared to last season. What's going on there? Maybe not quite the mold that we had expected from a guy coming in. I've told this story before, but I was actually at the Sleeman Center in Guelph a few years ago and bumped into Don Sweeney, who was scouting. Obviously now that was Matt Poitras, who played for the Guelph Storm. My belief was that he was there to look at a guy named Danny Zhilkin, who was later drafted by the Jets, who had a lot of more offensive upside, but looking back, it made perfect sense because Matt Poitras is the kind of player the Bruins want. Hardworking, works his butt off at both ends of the ice, can chip in offensively, and he has looked David Krejci-esque at some points with his ability to hold on to the puck and find guys for some open looks. He's a guy that I would like the Bruins to keep around, but there are rumblings that both sides are not happy, and he could very well be a trade candidate, especially with the emergence of Fraser Minten as your third-line center. You've got Elias Lindholm there, maybe looking to re-sign Pavel Zacha. James Higgins is coming in, so he could be a guy who is packaged in a bigger move prior to the deadline, and this is certainly something to keep an eye on here moving forward for the Boston Bruins. Coming up, we are going to update the Eastern Conference power rankings and see where the Bruins fit in the mix here with only a couple days remaining until the Olympic break. Have you ever hired someone who looked amazing on paper but just didn't end up being the right fit? Well, if so, you know how important it is that when you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, you have to trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites because Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed sponsored jobs help your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes a huge difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply, but if you're hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. And thank you for helping make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Regular listeners of the show should definitely check out the Locked On Everydayers Club. You will get ad-free episodes delivered straight to your Apple, Spotify, whatever feed you use for your podcasts. You'll also get an invite to the Locked On Discord server, which includes a channel dedicated to Locked On Boston Bruins, where we can continue the conversation. Check out lockedonbruins.supercast.com to learn more. Okay, today we are updating the Eastern Conference power rankings, and it's a look at where the Bruins stand here heading into the Olympic break with one game remaining on the schedule for the Bruins, which will be tomorrow night against the Florida Panthers. A huge game for the Bruins, as the Panthers are one of the teams chasing them for a wild card spot. Right now, if you look at the standings, the Bruins hold the second wild card spot with a 5-point lead over the Washington Capitals with a game in hand. They're also 7 points up on the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Ottawa Senators, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, with the Panthers, Philadelphia Flyers, New Jersey Devils 10 points back of the Boston Bruins. Conference-wide point percentage, the Bruins are currently in 7th with a .607 point percentage, a record of 32-20-4, 68 points, and well in control of a playoff spot at the moment. A 5-point lead over the Capitals is pretty solid right now, especially when you consider they have a game in hand. Now, since December 31st, and including December 31st, where the Bruins went into Edmonton and beat the Oilers, the Bruins have been the second best team in the NHL. Points-wise, they have 26. Tampa is the only team better with 27 over that span, and the Bruins' point percentage is .813. So we look at the game the other night, incredibly disappointing. A bit of a ref show. The Bruins kind of screwed when it came to penalties called. 4, none really called against. 7 straight power plays for the Lightning, including some lengthy 5-on-3s that Charlie McAvoy rightly called as the turning point. But in the grand scheme of things, the Bruins have been very solid over the last dozen games, or the last 16 games, including that game in Edmonton on New Year's Eve. They're 12-2-2, 26 points, .813 point percentage, and more importantly, their underlying numbers are a bit more solid than they are for the entire season. For the season, they are not a very good possession team, meaning the opposition has more shot attempts at 5-on-5, more shots, more scoring chances, more high danger chances, and therefore more expected goals. The Bruins right now are 50.27% when it comes to shot attempts at 5-on-5, which is about 15th. They're 50.5 when it comes to actual shots at 5-on-5, which is 13th. When it comes to scoring chances, the Bruins are 51.16%, which is 11th. And high danger chances, 5-on-5, the Bruins not faring as well. They are 20th in the NHL with a high danger chance differential of 47.81. What the Bruins have going for them is second ranked shooting percentage at 5-on-5, as well as the second ranked save percentage at 5-on-5. So that shows us that even while the Bruins' underlying numbers have improved over the last 16 games or so, they're really benefiting from the shooting success. And if you look at all situations, they have a shooting percentage of 15.3%, which is second, and a save percentage of 91.06%, which is third. Add it all up, and their PDO is second in the NHL, only behind the Buffalo Sabres, who are on a crazy run of their own. So what that tells us is that the Bruins are above average when it comes to both shooting percentage and save percentage, and if those fall back down to earth a little bit, then they could be in a little bit of trouble. And it's important to look at kind of the expected goals for versus the actual goals for and against right now. The Bruins, 67 goals for in all situations over the past 16 games, which is a pretty good sample size. The expected goals for, though, hover around 50.25. So that's 17 goals more than expected based on the shot quantity they're taking, the shot quality, scoring chances, high danger chances, etc. They've allowed only 44 goals in all situations. Expected goals allowed is 60. So they've, look at it this way, they've scored 17 more goals than expected and they've allowed 16 goals fewer than expected. Their expected goal differential is kind of minus 10, but it's actually plus 23. So that tells us that the Bruins, it's not necessarily smoke and mirrors, but it's perhaps a bit of puck luck that is working in their favor, meaning they're capitalizing on their opportunities. They've been getting fantastic goaltending from the duo of Jeremy Swayman and Eunice Korpisalo, with a couple obvious wrinkles, including that game the other night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. For the season, the Bruins' expected goals 5-on-5, which is where the majority of the game is played, they rank 19th with an expected goal differential of where are they? Right here. Expected goal differential of 46.44. They have scored 124 goals. This is at 5-on-5. They've allowed 114. Their expected goals for is 111, so that's 13 more than expected. Goals against is 128.75, and they've allowed 104. So their actual goal differential is 54% in favor of them. Goals for, 46.44. And if we look at all strengths, it's a similar situation. We know the Bruins have been very good on the power play this season. That's one of the reasons why they have been so successful. Expected goals in all situations, the Bruins actually rank 31st in the NHL this season, with an expected goal differential of 45.76. Expected goals, 171.2. And the expected goals against is 202.89. But real numbers, they have scored 189, which is 17 more than expected, and allowed 175, which is 27 fewer than expected. So that tells you the importance of goaltending for the Boston Bruins. It tells you the importance of the power play, which is really sustaining the Bruins so far this season. But it also tells you that they're not really as strong defensively as we would like. The penalty kill, we all know, has not been great. And there is serious room for improvement for this team. The goaltending has been excellent. They've been getting offensive contributions up and down the lineup, but they are allowing way more shots, scoring chances, and high danger chances than they are generating. And that's not typically a recipe for success. But they are in a playoff spot, and we'll talk more about how they rank in relation to the competition here as the podcast continues. So the Bruins, they lost the other night, but they're still 7-1-2 over their past 10 games and have the 5th most points among any Eastern Conference team so far this season. Tampa Bay, Carolina tied at 74 points. Tampa has the edge in point percentage because they've played 2 fewer games. Then you have the Detroit Red Wings, who won last night in impressive fashion, shutting out the Colorado Avalanche. The Montreal Canadiens at 70 points. The Sabres, who won last night, up at 69 points, followed by the Bruins, who are at 68, ahead of the Pittsburgh Penguins at 67 and the New York Islanders at 65. Now, the thing is that the way the playoffs work, you have to be a top 3 team in your division. You get an automatic spot. So even though the Penguins and Islanders have fewer points than the Bruins, their playoff spot is more secure because they sit 2nd and 3rd in the Metropolitan Division, respectively, whereas the Bruins are stuck in 5th in the Atlantic Division and therefore in the 2nd wildcard spot. They also are currently they are behind the Pittsburgh Penguins in point percentage, but ahead of the New York Islanders. Hard charging is the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are 9-1 over their past 10 games. They are, let's see here, 7 points behind the Boston Bruins in the wild card race, but only 4 points behind the Islanders when it comes to challenging for a playoff spot in the Metropolitan Division. The Ottawa Senators have won 4 in a row. They are at 61 points, 7 behind the Boston Bruins with the game in hand. The Washington Capitals are at 63 points, 5 behind the Bruins, but the Bruins have a game in hand. And then you have the Philadelphia Flyers, the Florida Panthers, and the New Jersey Devils, all within 10 points of the Bruins. The only team that's really out right now is the New York Rangers. They have a .446 point percentage and a -27 goal differential, which is good for last in both those categories. So they've pretty much written things off. The Devils are still sticking around, but they're without Jack Hughes. They appear to be a bit of a mess. -24 goal differential. The Bruins still have to kind of worry about teams that are, I guess, within the 7 points range. So that would be, well, first of all, you still have to worry about the Florida Panthers, and tomorrow night's game is going to be huge. The Panthers have lost 4 games in a row. They're at 59 points, 9 points behind the Bruins. With the Bruins' regulation win, they could go 11 points clear of the Florida Panthers, which would really devastate Florida's playoff chances. If Florida wins in regulation, then they'll only be 7 points back of the Bruins with the game in hand, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could come back. The Maple Leafs, they've won 2 in a row to maybe reinstill some belief. The Senators have won 4 in a row. The Blue Jackets have won 5 in a row. They're all 7 points back of the Bruins. The Capitals have won 3 in a row. They're now 5 points back of the Bruins. So that extra point the Bruins dropped the other night was pretty big. And we already looked last week. Everydayers will remember at the schedule the Bruins have coming up. It's one of the toughest schedules in the NHL. But they have a very strong home record, which they'll need to continue to build on. They've been playing better over the last 16 games than they have for the season as a whole. But the penalty problem we saw on full display in that Stadium Series game, that just cannot continue to happen. They cannot continue to lose their composure like that. They have to be smarter, more disciplined in order to stay out of the penalty box and give their penalty killers a rest, get guys like David Pastrnak out on the ice more regularly. They will have some reinforcements coming up for the game against the Panthers. Yesterday, it was announced that Jordan Harris has been recalled from his conditioning loan with the Providence Bruins. He's been added to the active roster. Elias Lindholm was placed on injured reserve to make room for Harris. So Lindholm out until the Olympic break. Hopefully he's able to suit up for Team Sweden at the Olympics, as he was selected to the team. Harris, much needed reinforcements on the blue line. And, I talked about needing a right-hand shot defenseman. Jordan Harris, unfortunately, is not that. But he's a guy who looked pretty good early on this season with the Bruins. He had a goal, 2 assists in 4 games with Providence, a goal and an assist in 5 games with Boston to start this season. And he's a guy who should be able to bring some important depth to this team and really, maybe give some other guys a rest here and there and see what he can do. So that is going to be a big addition back for the Bruins, despite Lindholm being out, which means tomorrow night the Bruins will have a tough test if they still have to go with Khusnutdinov, Minten, Poitras down the middle against the Florida Panthers, who are struggling, but still obviously a formidable squad as the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions. All right, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. My friends, thank you so much for taking the time. Big picture, the Bruins picked up a point against Tampa. They've got a pretty good hold on the second wildcard spot, but there's a lot of hopefuls looking to take that from them. and they have to really bear down here moving forward if they want to stay in that playoff mix. Matt Poitras could be a trade candidate to land a bigger fish at the deadline. Victor Arvidsson, Andrew Peeke remain candidates to be moved, as the Bruins could do a bit of a soft sell and buy at the same time. And we'll keep it locked to Don Sweeney, what he has planned. There is a trade freeze over the Olympic break, but there'll be no shortage of rumors swirling around as well. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so that you never miss a thing. Also follow along at Locked NHL Bruins, especially on Instagram and TikTok for some bonus video content. Check out the Everyday Club at lockedonbruins.supercast.com. Ad-free episodes, Discord channel access, and it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. Will be back tomorrow to preview the Panthers game and bring you all the latest on the black and gold here on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.